able to let us still buy properties, still get really low interest rates today when rates are still kind of high. It doesn't matter. When we learned how to do it this way, rates are always low. Doesn't matter what the market is doing.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you are enjoying this show and getting some great value for your investing goals, make sure you follow and hit that subscribe button, and also leave us that honest feedback, right? Give us that rating and review. It helps us, but it also helps other listeners find this show for their own investing goals. Now, we've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Jenn and Joe Delle Fave.
They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to KasmanCapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to KasmanCapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today.
With over 2 decades of experience, Joe and Jenn, the duo behind the Creative Finance Playbook, the #1 resource for learning how to buy real estate without traditional bank financing, relying on credit, or needing large cash reserves, all from the comfort of your home. Now, as hosts of the Creative Finance Playbook Podcast, which ranks in the top 10% of global podcasts, Jenn and Joe have established themselves as experts in the real estate community. Now, they've been featured on influential platforms like the BiggerPockets Podcast and Real Estate Rookie, and we are excited to have them here on Multifamily Insights. Let's welcome to the show, Jenn and Joe Delle Fave.
Thank you.
Man, thank you so much for having us on.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being great guests today. I read over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, so we're a husband and wife team. We've been full-time real estate investors for 4 years, but we did meet back in 2008 when the state of the market was really different. And I was an English teacher. He was in the car business, and we bought our first fixer-upper later on that year in 2008, and I was a little confused since I owned my own house and he owned his own house, and I'm like, why do we need a third house? Fast forward, it totally makes sense now, but I was not always on board, so I can definitely share some of my thoughts on that too. But we really had that vision of one day working together full time to be able to have more time as a family. We have 2 kids now that we homeschool. So through real estate investing, especially with the way we buy creatively, not having to go to the banks, we've been able to scale our portfolio and really walk away from those W-2 jobs.
I love it, man. You talked about really meeting and starting out in 2008, being full-time for the last 4 years, and starting out, you all had your own homes, came together, bought this third property, had a little hesitation, but ultimately realized the path that you wanted to build together. I know so many couples, especially, my wife and I used to host a meetup in Chicago, which the meetup is still running. We just moved to Cincinnati, but we used to host a meetup, and we would always come in contact with other couples, and inevitably, one person was super gung-ho excited and almost dragged their partner to the meetup, and the other person tended to be a little bit more reserved, a little more hesitant, and was trying to just figure out whether or not this is something they really wanted to do or should be doing. Can you just take us back there from your standpoint, right? Like, what was the hesitation? How did you get over that hesitation? And what advice would you give to other couples where one person is thinking about investing in real estate and maybe the other person has more of a hesitation?
Well, from my perspective, it was very black and white. Graduated high school. I was supposed to go to college and I was supposed to become a teacher and I had to get my master's degree. And I kind of thought that was my trajectory. The next 30 years, I would teach English and get my bell at the end of the day and be all done and retire. And then when I met Joe, he was like, hey, there's this whole world out there and you don't have to live within these confines of like these limitations you've set for yourself. And through a lot of personal development books, which he was already reading for years ahead of me, he really showed me this other side. And I kind of thought too, like you had to go to school and use your degree And, this isn't something they teach in school. So it was really kind of a huge mindset shift for me. And then once I saw, 1 property to 5 properties and we got to 10, I was like, okay, like this is rocking and rolling. I truly understood how we were helping buyers and sellers and all of the different things in between. But it was through doing, it wasn't until I was actually talking to people on the phone and helping them with their problems that's where my heartstrings really pulled me in that direction. I realized it wasn't about a degree on the wall. It was truly like you're serving other people. And that's I don't know if you want to share like how you got me wrapped into it a little bit more.
Well, I mean, I grew up poor. I grew up broke, poor. And so like I saw so many people that were real estate investors and I was like, oh my gosh, like must be the path. Right. But then one of my favorite books is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, probably the best book out there. And when they talk about forming a mastermind, they talk about the mastermind with your spouse is the best one you can have. You both are in it together. You're a partnership. If you both win, you win together. And so I ultimately knew, like, when I finally find Mrs. Right, like, I want to build an empire together, us together, and grow together. And so that was always my dream. And then I might meet this beautiful young lady who's a teacher, and she's like, numbers aren't my thing, and I'm a teacher. And I'm like, well, okay, right. So in the very beginning, it was me, like you kind of mentioned. But when things start getting from ideas into actual like properties, and you're getting checks, and now you're actually doing it, it kind of like, oh, well, this is turning from just kind of talking into a real hobby at first. And then that hobby turns into a business. And then next thing you know, it gave us the luxury for Jenn to quit her job when we got married and we wanted to have kids. And so I still had my job. So it took me years later until I was able to walk away from my job too and become financially independent, where 4.5 years now, I haven't had a paycheck from a JOB, and a JOB job stands for just over broke. It don't matter how much money you make at your job. You can make a very little, you can make a whole lot. It doesn't matter. You're still going to be just barely getting by. And majority of people, if you miss 2 or 3 paychecks, like that could be devastation, right? So I knew I wanted to start my side hustle. And I was always big on everybody I ran. I'm like, you need to start a side hustle and grow your side hustle until it's so big, you can't afford to go back to work anymore. And I was like, that was my dream. And so it didn't happen the way I anticipated it to happen. I was growing it. We were on that direction. I don't know if I was ever going to be able to quit my job though. And then COVID happened, world shuts down, and my wife's kind of giggling at me. She's like, you're not going back to work. Like, we've been talking about going full time. Now is the time to do it. We've learned how to buy. In the beginning, we were buying these junkers. We were remodeling them. We were paying cash or raising capital. We would finance or rent them out, refinance it, take all of the money back out, and then go look for another deal. But it was 2 years before the next deal would come upon. Sometimes a year, sometimes 3 years. And it was so slow, it wasn't really getting us there until we learned creative finance. And that just means that we can buy real estate without banks, without using credit, without having to get W-2 checks. And I don't even need a job anymore. Works for multifamily. It works for single family homes. It works for businesses. I know somebody who did it on a car wash, right? So it works on so many different things. And when I kind of fell down the rabbit hole of creative finance in 2016, it was like, I felt like I discovered fire. I was like, oh my gosh, does everybody know about this? Right. And so we started implementing those strategies, really dug in deep on that, and then just kind of our portfolio and our business took off.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more about the creative finance because I think there's so much rich territory there. And these are the things that investors can leverage to grow. And, you talked about starting out, Jenn was a little more apprehensive, really came with that education background, go to school, get your master's degree, do that for 30 years, retire. You came more from a scrappier mentality, not growing up with a lot and realizing, you know what, people in real estate seem to have more. Like, that's it. Like, I'm gonna figure that thing out and figure out how to make that work. As you were growing, sounds like after you started investing, that's when Jenn kind of got more involved and started coming on board. What was that first deal like? Because did you just go out and have these conversations and then buy the property, or did you all really collaborate on that first deal before you pulled the trigger?
So we were dating for our very first deal. We were dating for 6, 7 months, and it was kind of my thing. And I remember we were on a trip. My cousin was getting married in Las Vegas. We're from upstate New York. We're from Rochester, New York originally. We were in Las Vegas, and there was this property I found in the fall of 2008. Many people know the market was just about crashing. And you are able now to find deals right on the MLS. And I was just putting in low offers. And then when we were in Las Vegas, they accepted my offer. I was like, holy cow. And I remember telling Jen, and it was kind of like one of those things like, whatever.
Like, I was excited that he was excited, but I didn't understand.
Yeah.
Like, houses, he was taking me to some nasty houses, like cat smell, all the things. I'm like, this is gross. Like, I'm going to wait in the car and read my book.
And she's like, we already have an extra house because she moved in with me. Why do we need to buy another house? And this one's even like in bad shape. Like, you're not even taking her. I wasn't taking her to like the nice ones. I was taking her to like some, nice areas, but like the ugliest house on the street that was like nobody wanted. And, looking back, when we started in 2008, when the market was crashing, and in 2012, when we bought our next one, like those were some of the we made some great deals back then.
Yeah.
So I always think like just getting your foot started. Real estate, the great thing about it is you don't make $1 million overnight. I wish you could, but it's not like that. Maybe in some situations you can, but more realistically though, it happens over time.
Yeah.
And to grow from never going to college, because I didn't go to college, grew up broke, and now became a multimillionaire because of real estate investing. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like a dream come true. And because of that, we were able to quit our jobs. We were able to move to Florida. We homeschool our kids, and just got to live and do things that we want to really do. And it's still a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. It's not like we just sit around and count money all day.
We're not laying on the beach all day.
No, we're
Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah. But we still put in a lot of work. And I think that great work ethic is what helps us, continue to achieve our goals and to continue to move forward and grow even more.
I think you said something earlier that was really worth repeating, right? You talked about the book Think and Grow Rich and how that mastermind and that first partner really needs to be your spouse. And I think that's one of the insights that some people miss, because you may have this vision of being, this huge real estate investor or financial freedom or generational wealth. But if you're not laying out that plan with your partner, especially early in the relationship, then it's going to be hard to get aligned. And I think one thing that worked really well for you all is you weren't married yet. So as you were coming together, 6 months in, you're talking about what your life looks like together. What would it look like? And you were clear that, hey, this real estate thing could be big for us. So even though Jenn wasn't necessarily excited about the real estate, she cared enough about you to go along with you on these trips and check out these, cat urine infested homes. And ultimately, once that vision started to come together, you could get on the same page. And I just think that's so important to get on the same page. I talk to couples all the time, and the one thing that I always tell them is make sure you and your spouse are on the same page with the future life you want to live, whether that is homeschooling your kids, where you want to live statewide or citywide, what you want to do in your career. Because once you have alignment on that future vision, now you've got to be able to create the roadmap to get there. And that's where real estate could, or maybe it's not. But if real estate is going to play a role in that, well, now you have that foundation. I think that's so key. And it's something that I view as critical to your story, is making sure that you had that vision up front, because you very well could have just continued to work your job. Both of you work your job, and you and I certainly aren't talking right now, but you had a vision for what you wanted to create. And I think it starts with that vision. You starting to get into some of the challenges though, right? Like you're getting into these properties, you quit your job, you're having you're raising capital. But when things really start to click is when you uncover creative financing. How do you define creative financing, first of all? Like that feels cool and funky and, obtuse, but what is your definition of creative financing?
So, I guess the best way to explain is by just giving an example of what we did. And so it's a little bit easier to understand that way. But we ran into a seller. His name was Steve. Steve had a nice house in a good part of town. He inherited it from his grandfather. He lived an hour away. He was renting it to a coworker. He wasn't making any money. He was giving him a really great deal on it. But he said it was a hassle driving over there, fix things and the maintenance and stuff like that. He wanted to get it sold. So this was the first house that we looked at that wasn't a junker, wasn't a fixer-upper. It was turnkey. So he says, I'm not going to take some lowball offer. And it meant a lot to him. It's got sentimental value to it as well. So when he named his price, he still gave us a good deal on it. It wasn't like he wanted like over retail. We still got a fair deal on the property. But when we explained I could buy it at that price, but the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to buy it with owner financing. So instead of going to Bank of America and taking out a loan, I'm going to buy the property, but I'm going to pay the bank as Steve every month because Steve was the seller. And so I said, I will pay your price. I'm going to cover all the closing costs and fees. And then I'm going to pay you every month until I get it cashed out. So what we agreed on was I'm going to buy the property with $100 down, not 20% down, not 25% down, not half down, $100 down, which, to be honest with you, he didn't want to take it because he liked it so much. But I knew in order for the deal to be legitimate, I need to have a earnest money deposit. So I'm at McDonald's like, no, take the 100. He's like, I don't want it. So we did that for a few minutes, but he took it. But what we did was I bought it with $100 down. We had a 0% mortgage. He didn't charge us any interest. And we had a $500 payment on a turnkey house, a house that we could start putting in a renter right away. And I don't have to manage contractors for 3 months while they're putting new roof and windows, like none of that. We did take out some like old couch, and I think we painted a few rooms, but much other than that, the house is ready to go. So when we offered this property as a rental, we actually offered it with rent to own, or they call a lease option. And the reason why we fell in love with that strategy is our renters gave us $10,000 of a non-refundable deposit just to move in. Plus, we were cash flowing $500 a month, or pretty close to that. So not only were we cash flowing $500 a month, we were also paying off our debt at $500 a month. Right. So I just saw the gap in wealth being grown so quickly on those deals. And this is where like the light bulbs went off. I remember I'm like, oh my gosh. Once again, it was like I discovered fire. I'm like, I could pay his price. And the most important thing for him is he got his number, which for me, that was the least important thing, because if I've got $100 down, super low payment and no interest, like, what does it matter? Mm-hmm. But the fact that we still got a great deal on it was even better. It was like icing on the cake. So for me, I couldn't get to the closing table fast enough to close that first deal. That was back in 2017 when we did that one. And that's when the world to me was like, okay, I could conquer it. I could climb Mount Everest, right? And just go all the way to the top because I know how to do the strategy. And then the next person who reached out to us, we had a rent to own page where we were offering our rent to own. And she was like, I see you offer rent to own, but are you looking at buying any more properties? I was like, of course I am. So she was single. She met a man. She moved into his house. She had her old house as a rental, typically like what happened to Jenn and myself. So I was like, yeah, that sounds really familiar. She's like, I don't want to rent it anymore. Her renters moved out in the middle of the night, left it a mess. She finished the place up again, made it nice, but she's like, I don't want to be a landlord. So what we did on that deal, this is when I knew she actually had a mortgage. The first house with Steve was free and clear, so I could just pay Steve directly. On her property, though, she had a mortgage. And this is when I learned, and I wish I knew this back when I first started, that I could buy this house, but the mortgage, and take ownership, but the mortgage stays in the seller's name because she had a really low payment, a really, really low interest rate. I did not have to qualify for a bank. I didn't have to get a W-2 checks or 2 years of tax returns, no credit checks. I didn't even need to have a job. I bought that house with $100 down. We paid the $3,000 or $4,000 in closing costs. And then same thing. We offered that rent to own to our renter, who also gave us $10,000 to move into that house. We cash flowed really nicely for a very long time. And so once we realized I can buy the free and clear properties with seller financing, and then if they do have a mortgage, I can buy those too, I was like, wait a second. And a fun fact, 40% of houses all across the country are paid off. So 4 out of 10, they don't have a mortgage on them. So I love those deals, and that's everywhere, right? But then the other thing is, now the other percentage of people who have mortgages, well, 2/3 of those, 66% of those, have an interest rate right now under 4%. So I know when I walk into Chase Bank or Bank of America to get a mortgage, now we're allowing 7%, high 6s, high 7s, depending on what you're looking at, but you're paying about 7%. And if you're paying 7% interest and you're looking at today's prices, you put on the insurance policy and you pay the taxes, and then there's management and maintenance, and there's no cash flow. It's almost impossible to find deals that are cash flowing right now. And if I'm able to get 0% mortgages or still buy deals where I'm getting a 2%, 3%, or even 4%, those deals still cash flow. So this is what's been able to let us still buy properties, still get really low interest rates today, November 2024, when rates are still kind of high. It doesn't matter. When we learned how to do it this way, rates are always low. Doesn't matter what the market is doing.
Man, I love that strategy, right? I'm sure you got some people's attention when you said that first deal, you put $100 down and that's it, right?
Yeah.
$100 down, had to make that seller take the $100, and you paid him $500 a month. You rented it out right away, got a $10,000 non-refundable deposit. And then on top of that, you were cash flowing an additional $500 a month. So a great opportunity, right? There's very little risk for you in that situation because, you've got a resident who's paying you, you've got that non-refundable deposit. And just for those who haven't, heard of this concept before, let's just say that resident moves out, right? So they were leasing to own, so they gave you the deposit. But if they moved out, that non-refundable deposit goes directly to you, and then you can release that property, right? So again, you're out of pocket $100. That's all you're out of pocket. So to get $10,000 right away, that's an incredible investment with, kind of the infinite returns really based on the way you structure that deal. I love the second deal though, because I think the first deal is a little harder for people to come by, but that second deal where you talked about, hey, there was a mortgage in place, you kept the low interest rate that was on that asset, and instead you did, you assumed those payments, you took over, the responsibilities of getting a resident there, you gave them $100, you paid the closing costs, and now you've got two ways of structuring deals, whether it's owned free and clear by the owner, or if there is a mortgage in place. The question I know a lot of listeners have is, hey, that sounds great, but how realistic is it for an investor to be able to come across these kind of deals? Talk to us about how you're finding these deals and how others can look for these opportunities.
We got some cool things for your audience. We're bringing gifts today. Okay. So the first thing what we do is, just like anything else, we need to talk to motivated sellers. We've figured a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being unmotivated, 10 being like, come take my house, John, you could have it, right? I'm already gone. So what we've realized over the last 20 years is that every deal that we've done on the scale of 1 to 10, they're usually an 8, 9, or a 10 in the motivation scale. So first of all, work with motivated sellers. If you're talking to somebody and they tell you, I'm not interested in really selling, I just want to know what it's worth, don't waste your time because you're gonna, right? But I'll give you an example of the one deal we just closed 2 weeks ago. The folks have a house here in Florida. It's New Smyrna Beach, Florida. It's on the east coast of Florida. The house is 2 years old. Beautiful house, beautiful neighborhood. And their job transferred them from Florida to Texas. The husband's already gone. He's in Texas at the new job, new house. The wife is here in Florida, packing up the rest of the house. And she's ready to make the move. They don't want to sell it on the market. They really don't have equity. They don't have time, right? So when they reached out to us, their struggle was making 2 payments. They did not want to make 2 payments. He's already gone. She's behind packing up. So their level of motivation was really high, right? They have an extra house now. So when we explained to them we can buy it, and we can buy it and take over their existing mortgage that had a 4% interest rate, they were thrilled, right? So what we did on that deal, they did need a more than typical. So we did give them $12,000 down on that deal, which is, we usually like to buy with like $100 down, but this was a beautiful house. Like, it needed nothing, like nada. It is like ready to go, turnkey. They did leave some things behind, which we're getting cleaned out. We'll just clean it, and then we're going to offer it rent to own. So for $12,000 we gave them, plus we paid some closing costs. John, for $20,000 out of pocket, I own a turnkey 2-year-old house in Florida with the solar panels. My payment's $1,900 a month, including everything. And I know I could rent it for $2,500, $2,600 a month. So for me on that deal, the reason why I liked it, because anybody moves into that house, they're going to give me 20, 30,000 or more to put down. So how am I getting almost another free house that's 2 years old, that's turnkey in Florida? Like, these are real examples of stuff that we're working on today, right? The one we just wrote up last week, this lady has a house in New York. She's a landlord. Tenants moved out, left the place a mess. She's away taking care of her sick mother. Her sick mother lives on 300 acres in upstate New York. So she's like, I'm already overwhelmed dealing with my mom. She's sick. I got this huge property I'm taking care of. Now my renters leave and they leave this place a mess. She's like, listen, I will sell it to you for what I owe if you just give me $2,000 and you could take over my old payment. So for $2,000, we wrote up this deal. It does need some work in the inside, nothing major, just more of a mess than anything. And I'm able to take over a payment that I know once we do clean it up and put in a renter, I'm going to cash flow at least $500-600 a month on that door. So these have been my favorite strategies. So how do we find these renters? Or I'm sorry, how do we find the sellers? So there's a lot of strategies that work. You could do direct mail. You could run Google ads. You could do all of these things. You could door knock, cold call, drive for dollars. Like, the list is like 20, 30 things you can do. But I'm going to tell you my favorite one. I'm going to tell you the favorite one that doesn't cost any money, that anybody could do, and you can get motivated sellers to actually reach out to you. So these are incoming leads. What we do is, if I wanted to, say I'm looking to buy in Cincinnati, I would go on Facebook under my own personal profile. I'm going to go into Facebook. I'm going to go into the search bar. I'm going to type in Cincinnati, Ohio. And then it's going to ask you, are you looking for posts that were made about that town? Are you looking for people named Cincinnati, Ohio? Or are you looking for groups? I'm going to click groups. Now, there's all these different groups in Cincinnati, Ohio. There can be garage sale groups, yard sale groups, moving to Cincinnati groups. I love Cincinnati group. Cincinnati singles, looking for other Cincinnati singles. Like, doesn't matter. As long as the group has 10, 20, 30, 50,000 people in it or more, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the big groups. And then when I join those groups, I want to make a post. I make a post inside of the group. And it's so simple, you might giggle, but let me warn you, when you make this post, if you post this in like 4 or 5 groups, like, get ready, people are going to start reaching out to you. So the post reads, does anyone have a house for sale that's not market ready? I'm looking to buy one in the next 2 to 3 months. And before I hit submit, I make the background color like blue or pink or yellow or whatever you want. So it kind of like pops when they're seeing it in the group. You could even make it the poop emoji one, but I don't use that one. But what I do is, when I make that post and I hit submit, then what's going to happen are 2 things. They're either going to leave a comment saying, hey, I have a house I want to sell, and they're going to leave a comment on the post. But sometimes they just send you a DM. They send you a message. And the one thing you got to be mindful of, if you're not friends with them, there's like this message request folder in your Facebook messengers. And I didn't even know it was there for the longest time until I opened up and I had like all these people and they're like, hey, I'm thinking of selling my house. Like, they just sent me a message. I didn't even know. So if you're going to do this, those people on those posts, they're going to leave a comment. Those are deals. And then also, too, check your DMs in that message request folder. There's even like a little spam spot in there too. Check all of that, because I've gotten so many messages this way. People are going to start reaching out to you. Now, you'll also have agents who reach out. What are you looking for, right? You're going to have once in a while the village, whatever, who's going to say, oh, this is a scam. Here's the deal, guys. Every single comment helps boost your algorithms. So if somebody calls you a scam, I'm like, no scam here, just a guy looking to buy in a house, right? They'll even like, look at his Facebook page. He's an investor. I'm like, yep, sure am. Like, I don't fight with them. I take a higher ground, because when we first moved to Florida 2.5 years ago, I made a post. This was in 2022. The market was like super hot, especially in Florida. And I made a post in a local group here in the Sarasota area. And I made just the same thing. Does anyone have a house for sale that's not market ready? I'm looking to buy one in the next 2 to 3 months. Made it blue and everything. Put it in there. I had 209 comments. Now, out of the 209 comments, 203 of them are people saying the most meanest, rudest, wildest things. But this is when I also learned that people from Florida, A, don't love real estate investors buying up all the Florida houses, and they didn't like Florida or real estate investors from New York buying up all the Florida houses. So that's what got them all so rowdy. But inside of that, I got 6 solid leads. Now that the market's a little bit different here, I post it in there and I get way more cooperation because the market's soft. Now they just can't put it on the market in the weekend and sell it for way over asking. So now they're actually like, yes, I do have a house for sale. Their attitudes have changed. And this works all over the globe. So if you are in California or New York or Ohio, it doesn't matter, guys. There's Facebook groups. There's over 10 million different Facebook groups. So there's plenty to join. You post it into 5-6 Facebook groups a day, 5-6 days a week. Your post could be in front of hundreds of thousands of people for free. And I don't know a better way to get a message in front of hundreds of thousands of people without spending a lot of money. Now, Facebook's algorithms, they don't show it to everybody in the group. It's only like 7% of the people that see it. But if you just simply do the math, I could be in front of 50,000 people like that.
Joe, that's an amazing tip, very actionable. Anybody can do that right now. So I appreciate you sharing that, right? You're talking about going on Facebook under your personal account. So, for those of you who don't like using it, this won't work. You got to use a personal account to go into these groups in this city that you're trying to be a part of. Find the groups. You want to make sure there's enough people in those groups, so 10, 20,000 or more in those groups. And, obviously you can run it back, but what Joe said was, does anyone have a home that's not ready, that's not market ready, that they're looking to sell? I'm looking to buy the next 2 to 3 months. And that's going to allow you to get some leads. And now you obviously have to follow up and reach out to those people. So excellent, very actionable insight of how to get that deal flowing. I know we're coming up on time, but I think that the next question investors will have is, well, how do I actually structure this, right? If someone does have a deal, I get the notion of offering, seller financing, but is there a strategy or tip you use to present seller financing or that wraparound situation? Can you just talk to us maybe about, one insight there?
Yeah. So my favorite strategy, which I learned from negotiating, okay, and you're not born with great negotiating skills. You pick these things up over time, right? And learn from other great people. And the one thing that I've always learned was to never name your number first, right? Never ask great questions and have the sellers make you the offer. And so this is where I was like, okay, well, that sounds great, but like, what questions do I ask? Well, then we figured it out from trial and error for talking to thousands and thousands of people. It's absolutely insane. I've got probably close to 20,000 people in my system CRM right now because we've been doing it for a long time. But what we've done is we developed a script, which is just a series of questions. And these are the same questions that we ask every seller. So if your audience wants to get our script, like, we give it away for free. There's no charge for it. Same thing with that blue post, like, we give away the game so you all can get started. So if you do go to our website, you could just download it for free. But what happens on there, we ask them, like, why are they selling it? How soon do you want to sell it? The way our script works, believe it or not, they even tell us like what they owe on the mortgage, what do they want for the property, what's their payment. And the way that we've designed this script, probably about 90% of the time, they're going to give us all the information. And if they don't, they're not motivated anyways. But the motivated people, the 8s, 9s, and 10s, like we talked about earlier, they're going to be like, hey, John, listen, I got this house. I need to get it sold last week because I've already moved. I'm making 2 payments. I can't afford it. And I'm like, yay, I need to get on the phone call with this person, right? So if you go to our website, creativefinanceplaybook.com, you could download that blue post like we talked about. We have examples of how to do it right on there. And then this is the same script that we've been using and our team uses to help ask the questions. And here's the tip. When somebody reaches out to you on like the messenger, I'm just messaging questions. I'm copy and pasting question 1, question 2, question 3, one at a time. They're going to give me the feedback. And from their answers, now I understand, should I be talking to this person because they're highly motivated, or are they a 2 and they just want to know, why are you buying houses down here? Like, I'm not talking to that person, like not even a half second. So then this way, the way our script works is they're actually going to make you the offer. And now is the time to go into go mode and pick up that phone. They're motivated. And maybe you need a counter offer or however that works, but it's so simple, guys. I know it sounds crazy or complicated, but here's the deal. It works on single family homes. It works on multifamily. There's a lot of landlords who are just tired. And they want to sell. And if you're able to pay a good price for the property and they're still able to get that income coming every month, I'm telling you, there's so many wins that you're able to create with multiple different scenarios.
I love it. Go to creativefinanceplaybook.com if you want to check out some of those freebies that Joe and Jenn just talked about. They're really great insights, and I think it's very, very great, actionable. Love the tips and feedback you've been able to give our listeners. Again, that's creativefinanceplaybook.com. Right now, we're going to transition to our round of insights. All right, give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Jeeps. I mean, I could talk about one recently. We bought a seller finance deal, and I'm just going to pull back the curtains on it. We bought a seller finance deal in Massachusetts, in Boston, $5,000 down condo. The seller gave us a 1.5% interest rate. We lost $30,000 on that deal, John. $30,000. Because why? We inherited a really bad tenant. And this is where you have to be mindful. And so I would say the one big lesson that I've learned is if they have a really bad tenant in place who's not paying, fully disgruntled, like most meanest bad person, whatever, certain places, my gosh, they could be in that property for years before they're removed. And I'm not talking like 1 year or exaggerating. It was 2 to 3 years. So what I would say is if you talk to a landlord and they're just sick and tired, I need to know, are your renters paying on time? Are there current leases in place? Are you just throwing me one of your biggest problems? Now, don't get me wrong, we get paid to solve problems. I get it. But there are some problems that are just not worth the squeeze. And so in some states like Florida or Georgia or Alabama, where if that nonsense is going on there, they will come and they will get them out, right? But in certain states like Massachusetts, New York, where we're from, or California, you almost might as well just give these people the house because it's going to be so long before you get them out. It's crazy. So the property is a great property, although it's getting ruined by these people. $5,000 down, and even having a 1.5% interest rate, you think everything is great, and it sounded great, and it really was, until
we realized we were not superheroes and we could not get him out.
You need the jaws of life to get that dude out of there, and I don't even think
that was super frustrating, but a lot of lessons learned for sure.
I appreciate y'all sharing that. That's helpful. Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
I mean, I sound corny when I say this, but I mean, Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook has interest groups. I can meet other investors because there's investing Facebook groups, and your village, your tribe is everything. So I'm able to connect with attorneys, other investors, money lenders, I mean, everything. And then I could also find my sellers on Facebook by joining these Facebook groups. And then guess what happens? When we buy this house, I'm going to offer it rent to own. I put it back up on Facebook in those very same groups, rent to own, right? And then we find our renters. So I think Facebook, for
live their lifeline.
It's free. There's a lot of great software out there that costs money.
Yeah. I was going to say Asana. So we have team members, like I've got my executive assistant lives in Sweden. I've got a girl in Texas, people up all over the place, Philippine virtual assistants. So any sort of dashboard that you can use where everybody can collaborate has been a huge game changer for us to be able to do things virtually and not limit ourselves to an office and everyone has to be W-2 and sit all together, really have that freedom to be able to work from anywhere and just have a hub. I love Asana.
I love it. Give me the book you recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
The number one book that I give is The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. It is just an easy read, but his concept of what is easy to do is also easy not to do really resonates, especially with newer investors or people who are getting into creative financing, because it's like a lot of the mundane little things that people think like, oh, well, it's not a win. Like that's the win, right? Like the boring tasks that you're doing over and over again, talking to the 100 sellers, asking all of the questions, like that's what's getting you to the deal. And I just love that book because he really brings that home.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
I have my morning routine. So 8 pages a day of a book, and I gratitude journal, and then I really enjoy a workout, whether it's walking outside if it's nice out, or I've got my Peloton bike, so that helps me.
Yeah, and I think routines just get consistency. So, I mean, I like to get up early. I like to take the dog for a long walk in the morning. I like to get back, have a good breakfast with the wife and the kids, because we homeschool and we work from home and we own our own business. So there's not the mad rush out the door of like, I'm eating breakfast while I'm putting my work shoes on and the kids backpacking.
Buses are here.
Yeah, and that was like really chaos. So the fact that we could almost like just slow it down a little bit to me, and then when I, after breakfast, I hit the showers, and now I'm in my meetings and making deals and doing all of the things. And I feel like if you just get that routine going every morning, it just breeds consistency. And I am such a routine person. Like, I drink this Starbucks cold brew with 1 pump vanilla, like daily, right? Just one, but that's what I do. And it's like so routine. And so I feel like when I get a routine that's built for success, I eat well, I sleep well, like all of these things, you take care of your body, you enjoy the day. Like, there's gonna be times where, my gosh, you feel like you just got punched in the face. And like Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So it's how you respond to these things when they do happen is the key to your success, because bad things are going to happen to everybody. It's how you deal with that is what's going to determine your success. So just understanding going into it, like, it's going to be a little bit of a battle. There are going to be some things that are going to happen that aren't going to be just perfect. And there are going to be some wins too, right? But how I handle those and continue to move on. Because just like if I'm a school teacher or I work at a dealership, or doesn't matter what job you have, you could be the drive-through person at McDonald's. There's going to be some days that are great, and there's going to be some days you're like, what am I doing? But the best thing about it is I get to do it with my wife. I get to do it being around my kids, because I know a lot of really wealthy men from the car business, and the one common denominator is they said they always weren't around for their kids growing up. They had all this money. Now that they're retired, their kids want nothing to do with them. To me, that was pretty sad, right? Like, we're doing this for ourselves, and we're doing it for the kids and for our own future. So we include our kids with what we do. Like, they come to the meetups, they are in our business. Like, our daughter a year ago was helping me lock up a seller finance deal. Like, the video is on our YouTube channel. Like, she was 10 years old last year, and she's like locking up a seller finance deal while I'm in the kitchen cutting up an avocado, making dinner, right? So the fact that we're able to evolve with them, I think, is the key. So routines are I think, my favorite thing.
Give me your number one insight for creative financing.
Talk to motivated sellers. You got to remember, we're dealing with 8s, 9s, and 10s, which means the other 70%, which is the majority of your leads, aren't going to be your people anyways. So what you want to do is spend the majority of your time with your fewest amount of leads. And it's usually the opposite. We spend majority of our time with the biggest amount of leads, which are all the time wasters and not motivated people anyways. So if you just talk to 9s and 10s all day long, you're going to feel like a superstar. I got the cape on, I got the big S on my chest because I can close anybody. You can't. You're good at closing 9s and 10s. The 1s and 2s, you're never going to close them anyway. So to make you feel good about yourself and to build confidence and momentum, spend majority of your time with those 9s and 10s, the most motivated people, and you feel like you could accomplish anything.
And I would say open, know that people will say yes to terms. That was huge too when we first got in. I'm like, who on earth would not want their $60,000 of equity up front? You'd be surprised. Just ask the questions, keep it simple, and figure out what their why is.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Great insights. Let's go in a different direction. You're both in Florida, outside of Tampa. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
That's crazy.
I like the meat market. I probably sold yours.
That's okay. Yeah, I would say meat market's really trendy and upscale. Love it. And then Burns is a classic. We just got to go there. It's an experience. So really another great steakhouse.
All right, two good options there. Jenn and Joe, great information. Really enjoyed our conversations. We talked about just how you all started out as a couple, really understanding that you're that first mastermind, as spouses, and getting on the same page with what real estate could do for you investing. From there, as you started investing, recognizing that creative financing was really that opportunity to scale, right? You're minimizing how much capital you're putting in up front. You're structuring the deal where you're getting paid right away. You've got a resident who's going to be in there and taking care of the mortgage payments. So it's a great structure to minimize your risk and allow you to grow and scale. You created a plan to create that pipeline for deals coming through. Love the tip you gave us about leveraging Facebook groups to find people who are looking to sell their house. Really, really actionable, and I appreciate you sharing that. Again, for folks who want to learn more, they can go to your website, creativefinanceplaybook.com. We'll make sure we link to that in our show notes. I want to thank you both again for coming on the show today and being great guests. We look forward to staying in touch with you. and I hope you have a great day.